Today, we're going to be talking about a specific application that we offer called Content Controller. But before we kind of get started there, just a quick sort of set the stage, set expectations for sort of what we're going to be covering today. First, my name is Andy Whitaker. I've been with Rustici for almost 10 years. I talk a lot about our solutions. So I'm on the sales side of things here at Rustici. One of the solutions that I get to talk about quite a bit these days is our Content Controller application. So kind of setting the stage for us today before I get into the application and start clicking around a bit, just want to sort of lay this in front of you. Really what we're attempting to solve for with this particular application in the context of organizations specifically is all about helping to address content centralization challenges, as well as in this context, an extended enterprise challenge as well. So you'll hear me talk about Content Controller in the context of both of those use cases, specifically for organizations. A little bit of background on Rustici Software. We've been around for almost 20 years. I'm sure all of you have heard of us before, and you might be a customer of ours. If you are, thanks. If you're not, perhaps maybe this will tip you towards that. Either way, we've been working with e-learning technology companies and organizations for quite some time. We're behind the scenes. One of our pieces of technology is behind the scenes in a bunch of learning systems around the world, helping to support organizations and technology vendors. Many of you probably know us from our Swarm Cloud application, which is used by a bunch of people around the world for content testing and content distribution, all those good things. From a challenges perspective, when we come back and start talking about Content Controller specifically as a solution, in this context where we're talking about the organizations that use Content Controller, we're looking to solve a handful of problems for them. And I've listed them here. Quickly, I'll touch on each one of these, and then again, we'll get a little bit further along and dive into the application. Part of what we're trying to solve here and some of the challenges that our customers face prior to using Content Controller is around content library administrative burdens, versioning content, updating content, things like that. That's a challenge that we see a lot of customers come to us with prior to using our solution. The inability to turn off access to their content when necessary, if relationships end. This is more specifically related to the extended enterprise use case that some of our organization customers have that are using the application. Disparate learning data is a big challenge that a lot of our customers face prior to coming and working with us as well. They might have their content living in a bunch of different LMSs and no easy way to kind of bring all that data together into one place. And then standards. We're, as Rustici Software, known across the industry as a place to come to get your standards questions answered. But we also have what I would say, I'm biased, but what I would say is world-class standard support across all the different solutions that we provide, including our Content Controller application. So kind of setting the stage for us, before a customer comes to Rustici and starts working with the Content Controller solution, this tends to be what their course and content ecosystem kind of looks like. If we're looking inwardly towards an organization, you might be the type of organization that has a sort of a disparate, disconnected learning and development environment where different departments, different groups are using different learning management systems. Perhaps you have an interest in centralizing learning and development within the organization and going in a different direction as far as centralizing content and those types of things. The other side might be the extended enterprise type of use case that a lot of our organization customers have as well, where these sort of scattered LMSs are not internal LMSs, but rather LMSs that partners use, distributors use, resellers might use, where you're needing to share your content out to all these various systems. And there's a lot of challenge that comes along with a content distribution model that looks like the graphic that I'm showing here. There's no master content library. There's no easy way to cut off access when you need to. Versioning is an incredible headache and nightmare. Lots of different standards that you have to support across all these disparate systems, no centralized reporting, all reflective of the challenges that we're helping with in the previous slide. So after an organization comes to Rustasy Software and begins working with our content controller solution, we are creating more of a hub and spoke sort of ecosystem for their e-learning content. So we introduce the idea of a single master library with content controller. We have the tools, which I'll show you here in just a bit as we get into the application, to automate access control. Again, not so important for the internal use case, but can be incredibly important and useful when we're talking about an organization with an extended enterprise use case. Relationships end. Probably would be a good idea to limit access to the content that you've shared with your extended enterprise partners, essentially. We're going to streamline the versioning process because we're working with a single master content library. Content versioning becomes very straightforward, and what used to be an incredibly burdensome process of sending out new, let's say, SCORM packages to all these disparate LMSs becomes mostly trivial with a solution like Content Controller in place. Obviously, this hub and spoke ecosystem environment introduces centralized reporting, all the content living in one central application, being made accessible through disparate LMSs, but all the reporting and data flows directly through the Content Controller application and provides you with a single source of truth when it comes to how all these different LMSs are utilizing the content that you're delivering through Content Controller. And then the standardization problem gets solved as well. Content Controller ends up acting as the primary SCORM player, or whatever standard your content might conform to. And we're not so heavily reliant on having a third-party LMS have great standard support. Content Controller can kind of take care of that for you. So let's go ahead and spend the next little while actually looking at the application itself. I wanted to kind of get through that introduction part of the presentation relatively quickly, set the stage, but ultimately show you the application, the features of the application, the problems that it's helping to solve within the various sections of the tool. So the first place that I like to start when showing off the application is the Content tab. When you're looking at delivering content or making content accessible through third-party learning management systems, either internal LMSs or external LMSs, you might have a variety of content that you want to centralize and make available through those third-party systems. This particular tool supports, just like with our SCORM Cloud application, for example, all the different e-learning standards that you might publish your content to. So that includes SCORM 1.2, which most of you probably have relatively extensive SCORM 1.2 libraries. But if you also publish content to SCORM 2004, second, third, or fourth edition, we support all versions of SCORM essentially. AICC files are supported, XAPI and CMI5 are also supported. In addition to those standards-based formats, we also support a variety of different file types. So today that includes PDFs, MP3s, and MP4s. The nice thing about this for our customers is that if they have, let's say, a one-off video that they want to distribute to a third-party LMS, they don't have to first go to an authoring tool, create a SCORM package from that video to then utilize a tool like this to make it available. Just import the native MP4 file, and then I'll show you what it looks like to make that content available through the third-party LMS. The other nice thing about Content Controller when it comes to these different file types is that we're going to leverage the internal XAPI and CMI5 support that this solution has to give you visibility into the utilization of these types of files through disparate LMSs as well. So you're going to be able to tell, which users across which accounts have accessed the PDF, completed the PDF, viewed the MP4 file, completed the MP4 file, listened to the MP3 file, things like that. So we're building in some automated tracking, even for those native media file types that we're currently supporting. In addition to imported content, we can also support content that might be hosted on a separate web server. So if you just have traditional web content hosted on a separate domain, and you want to route that content through Content Controller to make it accessible through a standards-based LMS, our Rusty cross-domain solution is built into this application. So we have some organizations that are doing a little bit of both. They're importing content for distribution, but they're also enabling us to manage access and distribution to traditional web content that's just hosted on a separate domain, a separate web server. So once you get your content into the application, no matter what it might be, we're going to help you create this master library. So you only need a single copy of each course or piece of content existing within the application. From here, you can then organize it in different ways. You might have folders that make sense based on the type of content that you're going to be including into the application. And with our next release, which is coming in August, we're going to be adding some access controls at the folder level. So there's going to be some additional user types that are going to come with the next release, where you can actually set read-write restrictions even at the folder level within content. So if you have a rather large content team and you want to manage access based on the content itself being imported and delivered through Content Controller, that next release will have some additional capabilities around limiting access, what users can do within the system related to the folders that they have access to. Okay, so let's jump over into the account section. So accounts are all about the third-party LMSs that you're wanting to distribute content to. If it's internal LMSs, each of these accounts might be the name of the LMS that you're using. So maybe it's a Cornerstone LMS or a SADA LMS or what have you. If it's the extended enterprise type of example, these would be those organizations or partners that you're distributing content to. So it might be, Acme Inc. or any account that you might have. The idea here with creating accounts is to give you the option to set limits based on what we call licenses within the account. You might not technically license your content to a partner, but with license management in this tool, we're going to be able to automatically control how long an account has access to your content. And if you wanted to restrict it based on, let's say, a learner population, you could do that too. Most of our organization customers are just setting an expiration date for an account. For example, we'll talk about very briefly here in just a bit our Valvoline use case. Valvoline distributes their content into AutoZone, for example, but they want to make sure that the expiration date for the AutoZone account within Content Controller has an expiration date that aligns with when their relationship with AutoZone completes. If there's not a renewal, we're going to cut off access to that content for AutoZone when the expiration date is met. So the account page is mostly about setting up the license type, automatic restrictions based on access and things like that. Once you have the account created, then any piece of content that you've imported into the content tab will be made available through this add content wizard of sorts. So however you've organized the content, that's how it will be displayed here. You'll basically select the pieces of content that you need to make available to Acme Inc.'s LMS in this case. Once you do that, hit next, hit submit. All of that content's going to be added to the Acme Inc. Content tab. From here, then the last step is to make this content accessible through the third-party LMS. So the first time you do this, you'll tick this box here at the top, you'll hit the share button, and this is where you're creating the standards-based deliverable that you will share with the LMS administrator of the internal LMS, or you would share it if it's an extended enterprise use case with the LMS admin of the partner LMS that you might be working with. An important thing to note about the standard support within Content Controller is that the standard that you choose to publish your content to is actually decoupled from the standard that you publish these proxy packages to. So the idea here is that we're going to be providing, or you're going to be providing to the third-party LMS proxy packages for each piece of content that can conform to a variety of different standards based on the standards that that particular LMS best supports. But in this world, you could have XAPI or CMI5 conformant content imported into Content Controller, while still making that accessible through a SCORM 1.2 conformant learning management system. So lots of different standards and specifications are supported for the deliverable side of things. When I click Get Link, that's going to generate a download link for all of these SCORM 1.2 proxy packages. There's going to be a proxy package for each piece of content that you've added to this account's content library. And then you have two ways to distribute this content. You can either download the proxy packages yourself, maybe post them to Dropbox or a secure FTP if you want to go that route. Or alternatively, you can just click the copy link button and email the download link to your contact who is managing the third-party LMS. There are no special instructions to provide to that LMS administrator. These are just, in this case, SCORM 1.2 packages. Your content doesn't actually exist within the package itself. These are just proxy packages. They represent specific pieces of content that you've added to this account's content tab, but none of the content actually exists within the packages. What then happens very briefly is that LMS admin will import the proxy packages into the third-party LMS. They will assign the content to their users in whatever way the LMS allows them to do so. But then when one of these proxy packages is launched, the LMS will open up a new window and we will load your content inside of that window. Now, technically, Content Controller's player is present inside of that window along with the LMS's player if we're talking about the SCORM standard. And so what will happen here is that as the user is progressing through the content, we're going to be collecting all the course data in Content Controller and then automatically sharing data back into the third-party LMS. So always we will share back a completion status, a pass-fail status, a score if that's applicable, and total time. Depending on what standard the proxy package conforms to, for example, if it conforms to SCORM 2004, 3rd or 4th edition, we can also share interaction data back to the third-party LMS as well. So all of that's happening automatically between the two systems via this proxy package as the user's making progress through the course. If they were to exit early, come back, we'll resume them where they left off. So everything functions as if the content were being launched directly from the learning management system. But with this particular approach, we have this ability to cut off access when we need to and provide your team with all of the utilization reporting that you might want to have access to for the content that you're distributing to these various LMSs. So for the last few minutes of the demo, at least, I'm going to go into the reporting side of things. This usage tab is all about kind of high level usage. So if you are using the license management part of accounts, under the first license management section, we're going to give you some visibility into how close accounts are to reaching particular limits, how close they are to reaching an expiration date. It'll be color coded to be green, yellow, red. If someone has an expired license, for example, the status would be red. That account would no longer be able to access any content that you might have shared with them. The other usage tabs are really more about kind of high level usage information. So if I want to see all of the organizations that have access to a particular course, then I can select that course from the dropdown, select the date range, and see how many accounts have access to that course. The same could be true sort of in the inverse. If someone just needs to know what are all of the courses that a particular account has, Acme Inc., for example, then we can see a list of those courses and at a high level, generally how active they are within the different courses shared. The exports are all going to be CSV today. There are plans in place for having some access via API a little bit later. So as you go from left to right, we're going to come over into the course report. This is our course summary view. So for the All About Golf course, which I'll use as my example here, any launch across all accounts, all the data essentially that we're collecting for this course is going to funnel into the summary view. So these numbers could get rather large over time. And this is initially going to be just high level information, average scores, total time, score distribution, pass fail percentages, things like that. If your content is generating interaction data, question level data on a quiz or an assessment, we'll collect that information and populate the question tab with the results. Again, cumulative across the entire learner population. And then as we go a little bit further to the right, we're going to get into the learner report. So this is where you might have interest in seeing a specific account. You might also be interested then in seeing one or more courses that you've shared with that account, to narrow the view, go from high-level summary into a specific view into a particular account for a specific course. So again, completions, pass fails, average score, and down here at the bottom is where this report gets its name. So this is where any learner who has accessed this content one or more times for this specific account are going to be represented in this table. For every course launch, the LMS is going to share with us a learner ID as well as a first and last name. We do have a configuration where if we do need to anonymize that data, we can. But if we're not, we're going to show it based on how the LMS provided it to us. And then the most granular view is where you might click on an individual learner to see their individual results, how they're comparing to average scores in time, and then their individual answers to the quiz or the assessment. Last thing I'm going to talk about before we dive back over into kind of the presentation side of things is around version control. So this is a big part of why organizations tend to come to us and use this type of solution, is that if we remember kind of the distributed scattered diagram that I showed earlier, a lot of folks come to us with that particular distribution approach where they're just handing over SCORM packages to each and every LMS that they need to make their content available through. And that makes versioning and version control incredibly challenging for our customers prior to using this solution. With Content Controller in place, you go and make the new version in whatever authoring tool you choose to use, find that course within Content Controller, hit the version button, add the new course to Content Controller. And once you decide to make that course the active course, we will automatically route users to the appropriate version of the course without you having to redistribute anything to the third-party LMS. So that original proxy package is still the only thing that that system needs to bring that user to us, and then we'll route them to whichever is the active version. There's also an option to keep learners in progress on the old version on that version, while any new user could get access to the updated version. So for sake of time, there's some other things that I can show you, but if you're interested in a little bit of a deeper dive, reach out to me after this presentation, and I'll be happy to schedule some time to walk through things with you specifically and talk about your specific use case. Quickly coming back, just giving you a sense of the types of organizations that we work with. These are a handful of ones where we're allowed to kind of share their brand and those types of things, but we work with right now, I think we're in the ballpark of 60 to 70 Content Controller customers across organizations and specific publishers. We have a specific use case or case study on our website for Valvoline. Valvoline's been using the application for a number of years and having a lot of success with the tool. So we've got this case study. This is kind of high-level figures on their use case. But the case study in its entirety is on our website. If you have questions about any of that, let me know, and I'll be able to answer those directly for you. Okay, so we've got about 5 to 6 minutes left. I wanted to rush through some of this because I'm seeing here that there were some questions that came in from attendees. So I'm going to kind of quickly go through some of these. From Regina, are you an LMS? The short answer is no. We are a content distribution and management solution. So there is no way for an end user to come directly to Content Controller to access content. Today, it always has to be through a third-party standards-based LMS. If you're interested in understanding a newer way that we're going to be releasing here shortly, where we can actually launch into some content from a non-standards-based LMS, reach out. And I'll be happy to talk through that with you. But we are not an LMS, to be clear there. Differences between SCORM Cloud and Dispatch. It depends on which dispatch you're talking about. If it's Rustici Dispatch or SCORM Cloud, there's actually a comparison page on rusticisoftware.com. If you go to the search and type in Rustici Dispatch versus Content Controller versus SCORM Cloud Dispatch, you'll find actually a comparison table that will go through the different features. At the end of the day, it's all about controlling content. and making it available through a third-party system. So Dispatch does that in its particular way, and then Content Controller handles it in the ways that I've showed today. Is traditional web content meaning learning standard content hosted elsewhere, or web content like a blog post article? So the way that I'm describing traditional web content in the context of what I showed you within Content Controller is non-standards based content that is hosted on a separate web server. In most cases, that's going to be kind of a traditional website where you might have videos or just, you know, a blog post or something like that. Our customers need to control the source code of that website or web application in order for us to help them distribute it, manage access to that content through Content Controller. But if you have that, the Rusty cross-domain capability within Content Controller would help in that regard. Let's see, are there any features such as expiration that will help us be GDPR compliant? So yes, GDPR is something that we have implemented some capabilities around, primarily from a GDPR compliance perspective for this tool. It's about target exporting specific learner data and target deleting specific learner data. I don't believe that there's anything in the tool today that's going to automatically delete learner data based on a particular expiration date, but there are ways to get at specific learner data to export it and share it, or to delete that data if you get that type of GDPR request. From David, I assume you cannot convert or upconvert SCORM 1.2 to 2004 XAPI, but you can CMI5 down to SCORM 1.2. So if you have SCORM 1.2 content and you do want to make it available through a SCORM 2004 based LMS, we can do that. But what we're going to be sharing to that third-party LMS is the SCORM 1.2 data that we've captured. So it's going to be completion, pass, fail, score, total time. So if we don't have the data, we can't share it with the third-party LMS. Absolutely, the downgrading going from CMI5 to a SCORM 1.2 or XAPI to a SCORM 1.2 is something that we do all the time these days. Can we reset, edit a user's completion data via Content Controller? Not yet, to my knowledge. Although if that's something that you're interested in, reach out and we can dig into that a little bit more to get a better idea of what you're trying to accomplish there. What are the requirements for the third-party LMS? Could it work with, for example, an e-learning plugin on a WordPress site? So today, prior to this next release, where we're going to be adding some additional launch capabilities to non-standards based systems, today the third-party system has to support SCORM 1.2, SCORM 2004, third or fourth edition, AICC, or LTI. Without those standards in place in the third-party system, Content Controller would not be able to make content available through that system. Now, again, if there's something, Mike, that's interesting to you from making your standards-based content available through a non-standards-based system, there are some things in the works today that might be able to help there. So feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to chat with you more about that. Mentioned traditional web content is another one that David mentioned. What is that? Again, it's just traditional web content hosted in a website on a web server. We can help you manage access to that type of content as well. Okay, so there's a handful of other questions that are in the doc. I appreciate everyone's time. I know we're coming up on the bottom of the hour. Let me see if I can take maybe one more. What is the pricing model? That's a great question from Marco. This is a unique user-based license model. So if you are interested in understanding how we would price Content Controller for you and your organization, please reach out to me and I'll be happy to talk to you about what the license looks like and share some indicative pricing based on a potential user population that we would need to cover with the license. All right, so we're about done on time today. You can see from this slide that's been up for a little while now. I love talking to people about this. This is a solution that we're incredibly excited about, and it's a growing product for us. So if you are interested in learning more, please reach out. You can reach us at info@scorm.com or rustlysoftware.com. And there's also a survey that we'll ask you to fill out at the conclusion of the presentation. I'm the person you would be reaching out to or speaking with in those instances. So please feel free to do that. And I appreciate everyone's time. This was a very quick presentation. There's a little bit more that we can get into on a one-on-one basis if you're interested. But I appreciate everyone's time today. There's also going to be a recording made available that we will reach out to everyone that registered for the webinar and provide access to that. So with that, I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. We are going to be doing a similar presentation tomorrow that's about content publishers. So if you fit that content publisher category, you might want to join tomorrow's webinar, same time, same place. All right, thanks everyone. Appreciate everyone's time and have a good rest of your day.